Hello, BookTube. Well, I just sat and recorded this video, and when I went to look at the playback, it was only 13 seconds long, despite me having sat there for 20 minutes recording it. So I have no idea what happened there, but I'm now recording on my phone, and hopefully won't have any technical hiccups. But anyway, hello, BookTube. It's been a very long time since I made a video. One of those things where the longer you leave it, the worse it gets. So I'm just diving back in with a reading update. I'm just going to talk about the books I'm currently reading, not any books that I've recently finished or anything like that. So it's 5 books, each of which is in a different category, more or less. Um, so the first being a novel. Uh, by David Leavitt or David Leavitt. Um, I suppose it's Leavitt. Sounds called Martin Bauman or A Sure Thing. It's a book, well, an author I'd never heard of before. Simply found this in a used bookshop, and it sounded really interesting. It's a book about writers and books, and I'm a sucker for any book or film about writers and books. So this one in particular about a young gay writer in New York in the 1980s. This book itself was published in the year 2000, and it's easy to assume that it's an autobiographical novel. I don't know if it is. There are certain elements which surely align with the author's own life. Just by looking at the author bio, he was very young when he had his first book of stories published, and um, in the novel, Martin Bauman has his first story published when he's like 19. So, um, but there's a lot of discussion about that topic in the novel. For example, there's a writer who she's working on a novel about a lesbian, and she asks Martin Bauman, if you were to read this, would you assume that the author was a lesbian? And he says, yes, I probably would. So, yeah, there's a lot about that, which is quite interesting. But and anyway, the book opens. As I said, I'd never heard of it before, and I started looking through it. I just sort of started reading it, and then found myself reading it, and now I'm halfway through it. So it's about well, it starts with this sort of brilliant portrayal of an eccentric, intimidating writerly figure, who runs a weekly seminar at Martin Bauman's university, um, and the seminars last about 4 hours long, and they mostly consist of the writer Stanley Flint lecturing them about writing in abstract terms, and they're all in awe of him, of course, everyone is, and he has them read their stories out, except if he doesn't like the story, he will stop them after the first sentence and move on, which happens more often than not. And Martin Bauman has never got past the first sentence until he starts working on a story he's really proud of, and he spends hours and hours in the library working on it, and brings it to class, starts reading it, and isn't stopped after the first sentence. Um, and he gets to the end of the story. It takes about an hour, and of course the teacher loves it, and Martin Bauman becomes sort of the teacher's pet, and I guess it's the start of his sort of writing career, but it's brilliant. And then it switches gears. In the second chapter, it starts. It's written in the first person. It goes through his sort of social life as a college student. He hangs out with the gay and lesbian crowd in bars. finding his own identity. He has crushes. Uh, but then he also, of course, he's still writing. He starts sending stories out and gets interest from uh, what's called the magazine, which I can only assume is the New Yorker or based on the New Yorker. But in the novel and in Martin Bauman's family, it's called the magazine um, because it's so highly regarded and they subscribe to it and they read it every week. And the magazine basically say, we've read some of your stories. We think they're great. Do you think you could send us something? And he starts working on this story about a young gay guy who's coming out to his parents, and the magazine publish it or buy it, and it's sort of revolutionary at the time. They've never done anything about um, with a gay character like that before. Um, the only thing is, Martin Bauman hasn't actually come out to his own parents yet, so it's a sort of double whammy because he can't tell his parents that he's getting a story published in the magazine, which they subscribe to, because they're going to ask what it's about, and then he'll have to come out to his parents. So it leads to a brilliant scene where he has to sort of reveal both pieces of news at once, and it's just brilliant. So yeah, as I'm sure you can tell, I'm really enjoying this book. I'm about halfway through. It's an absolute treat for anyone. Well, as any of you would be bookish people. Just about the New York scene, some characters made up, some real life characters pop up, some characters I'm sure are based on people in real life as well. But yeah, brilliant, really enjoying it. As I said, never heard of this author before. Looking forward to reading more by him. Next, I picked up, well, not next, but I also picked up the volume 1 of the collected plays of Edward Albee. Excuse me. I hadn't read a play in a very long time, so I thought I will try these. I've had this for about a year. Bought it from Oxfam, got a really good bargain on it. I didn't realise quite how good a bargain it was until I came home and sort of looked up how if I could get volumes 2 and 3 as well, and found that they're all really expensive for some reason. Even the paperbacks, especially the paperbacks. In fact, I don't know why. They're only published 10, 15 years ago, but they're really quite expensive. So I don't think I'll be getting volumes 2 and 3 anytime soon, unless I can get a good deal on them as well. But anyway, I've got volume 1, so I'm reading it. Edward Albee, if you don't know, is probably most famous for the play Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, because that was then made into a brilliant film by Mike Nichols, which I've seen in a long time actually, but that's in volume 1. Haven't got to it yet. That's the next one, I think, but most of these plays are really short, except that one, which is like 300 pages long. So the first 2 or 3 are heavily influenced by Samuel Beckett, especially the first one, actually, the zoo story, which has a sort of similar setup to Waiting for Godot. Guy sits on a park bench reading, another guy approaches him, starts talking to him, and steadily becomes sort of more and more unhinged and goes on a rant about, he's telling him this story about his landlady, and it's only like 20 minutes long, this play, but telling him the story about every time he goes home, he has to confront his landlady's dog, and he has to figure out a way to get past it every time. And I think it's a funny little story, play, but I think it's supposed to be like an allegory to their actual their present situation where he's like approaching this guy in public. I'm not sure about that. I don't really know, but that's the way I've sort of read it. Um, but yeah, entertaining nonetheless. I watched a couple of YouTube versions that have been uploaded to YouTube anyway, amateur productions, just to see. Um, in fact, I've been performing these to myself just by reading them aloud in American accents. I wouldn't dare, wouldn't dream of revealing to the general public. I couldn't do them in British accents because that sound ridiculous. These are published in the 50s and 60s, and no one in Britain talks like this, so I had no choice. But unfortunately, whenever I try to affect a American accent, it comes out as if it's from the deep south, which is a perfectly legitimate accent. It's just not what I'm aiming for. But anyway, yeah, enjoying the plays of Edward Albee. And thirdly, doing a pseudo buddy read with Shawn the Book Maniac, you may have seen on his channel. This biography of Ronald Firbank by Brigid Brophy. So I won't talk about it too much here because we'll be doing 2 videos, in fact, with Shawn the Book Maniac on this. One video on the first half and another video eventually on the second half. So the first one should be doing it around March. And I'm really liking it. I'm nearly finished the first half ahead of time. I've been pacing myself because I'm trying to read it at a similar pace as Shawn, and I don't want to read it too quickly because I'll forget everything by the time we do the video. But the way it's structured is the first chapter is pure sort of literary theory, which is really interesting actually. Can't believe Shawn liked it. I can't fathom how he's enjoying it at all really, but he seems to be, judging by his video, his Friday reads. The second chapter is now on Firbank's life. The third chapter, I think, is more on Firbank's life, and then the fourth part, I should say, is on his actual fiction, which I think I'm looking forward to most. He had a very interesting life, but I seem to enjoy the literary theory stuff more, and I'm looking forward to Brophy's interpretation of his fiction as well. So again, I won't say too much more because we'll talk about it with Shawn, so stay tuned for that. Fourthly is poetry, which is the complete poems of A.R. Ammons. This is volume 1 of 2. I do also have volume 2 downstairs, which looks exactly like this, except the A is an R, and where it's blue it's orange, and where it's orange it's blue, so they're sort of yin and yang kind of on the shelf. Beautiful, beautiful volumes published by W.W. Norton. And I've been eyeing up these volumes for about a year now. I've been picking them up in the local bookshop, sort of drooling over them for about a year. And it was only recently that I read a back issue of Poetry magazine in which Simon Armitage talked about reading this author, and it was a really compelling sort of article. I thought, I've got to read him now. And so I thought, I'm going to ask for these volumes for my birthday. But then something else came up, and I've got plane tickets for my birthday because I'm going to Italy in a couple of weeks to see my brother who now lives out there in Trieste, which is James Joyce City, by the way. He lived there for about 10 years and wrote some of Ulysses there, so they've got statues and bridges named after him and shops and museums, and I'm looking forward to seeing all that. Anyway, so I've got tickets to go to Trieste instead now, but so I thought, well, I'm not going to wait till Christmas to ask for these, so I'll just buy them myself. And they're quite affordable actually. I mean, technically they're about $50, but that's about £37, so it's not too bad. And I could have gone for a bit cheaper online, but I'm rather sort of support the local bookshop. As I say, I've been picking up these volumes for about a year in that bookshop. I don't know if I've been picking up the exact same books and no one's bought them, or someone's bought them and then they replace them. So in a few weeks, I'll go back and see if they've replaced them, just for my own peace of mind. It's the kind of thing I think about. But so I finally got the volumes. A.R. Ammons, which stands for Archie something. Ammons, I'm sure, I could have sworn it said here, but I can't see. It must have been in the introduction. Anyway, he was an American poet called one of the greatest of the 20th century, although I don't think he's that well known. I think partly that's due to the fact that he didn't do any public readings, or didn't do very many, because he's suffered from stage fright. But he did win the National Book Award, for which collection I can't remember, but just from what I've read, and I've read about 100 pages so far, reminds me of Wallace Stevens, who's one of my favourites, but perhaps a bit more accessible, a bit more demotic, if that's the word, or a word. And one thing that's unique to A.R. Ammons is his sort of connection to science. So there's a lot of, sort of nature in his poetry, but also science, and so it's one thing I've noticed, but also just from what I've read, but also from the introduction by Helen Vendler, a really good introduction that she writes about. He actually studied science at university, and just was an avid reader in science as well. So that comes out in his poetry, which is really interesting. And yeah, they're just beautiful, beautiful books to have. You might think that, £75, £80 is a lot of money to buy on 2 books of poetry on that you don't even know you're going to like, and you'd probably be right in thinking that, but I do like it, so it's fine. There's also, these came out about 2017, so I don't know why I assumed they'd just come out like last year, but anyway, these are first editions. And there's a chap who's he's been working on a biography of this poet for a number of years now, which hopefully we will see pretty soon, because I think that would be very interesting. And lastly, perhaps surprisingly, is the Complete Adventures of Paddington by Michael Bond, which is a children's series. And the reason I picked this up originally, I have to thank Sean D. Standfast, actually. He's doing a sort of, I'm going to put this down for a bit, it's heavy. He's doing a sort of children's series, or a series where he's reading children's books that he could have read when he was a child, but didn't, and this is one of them. And he talked about the first book very infectiously. He absolutely adored it. So I picked it up I downloaded the sample on my Kindle, and I also loved it, and ended up buying the first book and reading that, and then the second book and the third book. And I thought, well, if I'm going to read these on my Kindle, I mean, I'm liking reading them on my Kindle, but I should buy the book as well. So I had a choice really. There's a number of different collections out there, as I'm sure you can imagine. Um, I had a choice between sort of a box set of 15 books in slim volumes, which look quite nice, or this big hardcover, which comes with a slipcase as well, the 60th anniversary edition. Both of them were very affordable, so I wasn't too worried about that. So the only thing was, I thought maybe it's a bit too unwieldy to be reading, which it is, but it's not too bad. But it's a very nice edition, and I am reading from it, and it's double columned as well, and illustrated, of course, by Peggy Fortnum, and later some of the later books, W.R. Alley. I forgot to include my favourite illustration of Paddington getting stoned there. It was the 60s, so I'm on book 5 or 6, and absolutely love it. Yeah, I read a chapter or two right before I go to sleep at night. Gives me sweet dreams. So I haven't seen I know everyone talks about the recent films. I will watch them eventually. But I have been watching the original TV show from the 70s, which is voiced by or narrated by Michael Horton, I think it is. It's really charming. It's just delightful, sort of stop motion slash animation. And a lot of they're just 5-minute episodes. They're all on YouTube for free. A lot of the stories are taken directly from the books as well, which is nice. But yeah, that's everything I've been reading. That's everything I am reading. Thanks very much for watching. Don't forget to smash that like button, and I'll speak to you next time. Thank you very much.